Welcome, everyone. We are going to get started in just about a minute. We'll let people get connected here, but welcome to our webinar today that is co-hosted by the Break Exchange and the Arch National Respite Network and Resource Center. We'll get started in just a minute. Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Kim Whitmore. I am the director of the Break Exchange, and I am pleased to welcome you to today's webinar, which is co-hosted by the Arch National Respite Network and Resource Center. I want to just share a little bit about the Break Exchange with everyone for those who aren't as familiar. So the Break Exchange is an international group of researchers, respite providers, agencies, and individuals who are all committed to building a culture of evidence-based respite care. The Break Exchange was founded in collaboration with a great partnership between the Arch National Respite Network and Resource Center, Shared Care Scotland, the International Short Break Association, the School of Nursing at UW-Madison, and Marquette University College of Nursing is now a new partner in my new role there as an assistant professor in the College of Nursing. There are many benefits to joining the Break Exchange, a great opportunity to connect, learn, share, and collaborate. Connecting with this great global network of researchers, respite providers, agencies, and individuals. We have a new exciting opportunity to connect. We are beginning a monthly networking hour that will be starting this month. It'll be on the second Monday from 12 to 1. There's more information about that in our newsletter, and we can certainly share some information in the chat about that. We currently have close to 200 members from more than 15 countries that are part of the exchange and growing. We're really excited about the continued growth of the Break Exchange. And this is a great opportunity to learn about evidence-based respite care practices and research that's happening all around the world. It's also a great place for you to share your best practices or research with international partners. We invite you to share your work as a feature in our monthly e-newsletter. We can put information on our website and social media platforms, and we welcome you to think about presenting a webinar just like we're doing today. Break Exchange ideally is a place where we hope to connect people to create collaborative opportunities to engage in research and evaluation projects and leverage this exchange to help identify new partners. On our website, we have the opportunity for you to create a member profile, which allows people to search for you. And this is a place where you can go and search to try to identify potential partners and collaborators as well. So many ways to stay connected to the Break Exchange. We have a lot of social media connections. You can check out our website, or you can always email us at any time at the email that's listed on this slide. I always like to include just a reminder to all of us about the importance of respite and self-care. So this slide here says self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. So really excited to have this opportunity to promote and share more about respite. I'm going to briefly introduce our webinar speaker today. Jonathan Cottor is an incredible man. I'm really getting to know all the great things he has done. He is a father, an advocate, and the co-founder of Helen House in Phoenix, Arizona, here in the United States. And he was recognized, or the Helen House was recognized by Arch as an innovative and exemplary respite service in 2020. So I will let him share a little bit more about himself and give him the floor. But thank you so much again for being here. And the stage is yours, Jonathan.
Fantastic. Let's share our screen here. All right, I think we're set to go, yeah. First, I'd like to start with a thank you to Dr. Kim Whitmore and the Break Exchange for creating the opportunity to present this webinar today, and also to Jill Kagan with Arch National Respite Network and Resource Center for getting the word out and promoting this. So I'm excited. As Kim just said, I'm Jonathan Cottor, a proud dad of a son diagnosed at 9 months with spinal muscular atrophy. And he lived an incredible life until his death at 17 years in December of 2018. Along with my wife, I co-founded a successful pediatric palliative care and hospice home in Phoenix called Helen House. After a 30-year corporate marketing and leadership career, I've decided to pivot my energy fully to my heart. To that end, I decided to go back to school and earn a second master's, this time an MPH at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, with an emphasis in policy and advocacy and a certificate in maternal and child health. Now I am driven to impact system changes for children with complex medical conditions and their families and the scalability of children's hospice homes in the US. I appreciate you taking the time to attend today's webinar, and I look forward to our discussion in just a bit. I believe that the number one wish that families of children with medical complexities have is a cure for their child. They'll give anything to make it all go away. Sleep is number two. Another midnight trip to the emergency room. Go ring the neighbor's bell and ask if they'll let Oliver finish sleeping. Feed him breakfast and get him dressed for kindergarten, Mom says as she wakes her husband. Her husband wrings his eyes, throws on a t-shirt and shoes, and heads out the door. It's 12:15 a.m. Their youngest has severe cerebral palsy and trouble breathing. It's particularly bad this night, but they can't leave their older son alone since it will take both of them to drive and provide care to their youngest as they head to the nearby children's hospital. This is the second time this winter, but things usually get back to normal in a few days. If it were just a cold, they would handle it at home. More stress, but they're used to that. In the US, there are 74 million people younger than 18. We're all familiar. We used to be one. Nearly 1 in 5 children in the US have some sort of special healthcare needs. About 2.1 million US children have more medical complexities. Some of those children will die. Children are not supposed to die, but sadly, some do. New parents look forward to a full night's sleep by the time their baby turns about 6 months old. Fussy babies or sick toddlers add extra stress for the new parents, but they eventually resolve. Now imagine that this does not stop. For a family whose child has a pediatric cancer, neuromuscular condition, or some rare disease that most have never heard of, the extra caring is multiplied and continuous. Day after day, week after week, it gets harder as the disease progresses. How do these parents get a short break, some respite? I'd like to introduce you to an amazing young man, my son Ryan. That's him with his older brother, also amazing. This photo was taken when we were living in London, just 2 weeks before we were told by doctors that Ryan had a life-limiting disease called spinal muscular atrophy. Take him home and love him, and do not expect him to survive to his second birthday. Our world was shattered. The photo on the right was taken a few months before Ryan died, in December of 2018. He lived to 17 years old. Ryan was incredibly bright and mature. Very physically challenged, he needed an adult caregiver for all of his daily living needs: eating, toileting, bathing, and even rolling over to change positions when he slept. Spinal rod surgeries, hip surgeries, tons of physical therapy sessions, respiratory breathing machines, a power wheelchair for mobility, and many emergency room and hospital stays. His life was awesome and way, way, way too short. Let's help everyone understand this in detail. Let's talk about real life. This is a typical day when our kids were in grade school. This is just the day. At night, we used a baby monitor in his room because Ryan would call out 3 to 4 times a night to be turned. So either my wife or I would walk down the hall, shift his position, and return to our bed, hopefully to quickly get back to sleep. If he had a cold, we'd put a blow-up mattress in his room because he may need to get up every 45 minutes throughout the night. At least one of us could get some sleep. And then after a couple of nights, it was the other parent's turn. Eventually, the exhaustion was overwhelming and we pushed for nighttime nursing. We got the hours approved for 7 nights a week, but accepted 5 nights so we could retain 2 nights for our family just to be our family. Getting the hours authorized is one challenge. Then securing a nurse to work that shift was even harder. Ryan had many great ones, and some of those didn't last too long. Those that did became a very important and close part of our extended family. All right, but back to the daytime. The extra time needed for Ryan's care is over 2 hours a day, and Ryan required an adult to help him with all of that. Compare this to a typical family of 4, and it's pretty straightforward why parents need a break. Caring requires a unique skill set and patience that is developed over time. Parents and family caregivers are forced to adapt and develop those skills very quickly. On the other hand, professionals choose to work within this type of environment, but it's not conducive to everyone. Life is dynamic. A life-limited child benefits best with continuity and high-quality care. Change is a reality, but especially difficult for a life-limited child. I want to touch on a few of the many examples of home life situations that increase stress and create elevated risk factors for a life-limited child. Exclusive caregiver. As we were building Ryan House, I heard many people talk about their children who have only been cared for by a parent and never exposed to other caregivers. If and when that parent gets sick or has their own personal needs, that child requires a new person, which can be very scary. Most parents voice that occasional opportunities to catch up on sleep can be one of the most single biggest benefits for their child. Always running tired increases the risk of mistakes in administering prescriptions and therapies, creates impatience, and lowers a desire for life-enhancing activities for the child. At home or at school, most life-limited children may rarely come in contact with other special needs children. They feel isolated and struggle to develop peer relationships. In a moment, we'll talk more about a solution that creates a safe environment with like children where friendships flourish outside of their stay. Everyone's heard about the divorce rates cited through many sources. It's estimated that as many as 90% of families with a life-limited child end in divorce. Providing short-term breaks helps protect the family unit. Happier family equals happier child. Finding quality caregiver support for the evening is a significant challenge for families, even more than during the daytime. And the learning curve. What and how to advocate for their child. Life-limited children often miss having their needs met because parents are learning as they go. Interaction with other families on similar paths speeds the learning curve and benefits the child with appropriate solutions to their needs. So even if you're not living these experiences firsthand, I'm sure you can appreciate the daunting task. Who can help? Grandparents, aunts, uncles, neighbors, maybe babysitters. They want to help, but with being unfamiliar with daily routines and equipment is a tremendous responsibility that most are very uncomfortable with. Home health nurses and caregivers are a relief, but low wages can create dependability issues. Turnover of caregiving support is a big challenge. There is help, at least in some communities fortunate enough to have a children's hospice home. These places support our most fragile families on the most difficult journey imaginable. To qualify for services at a children's hospice home means that your child is not expected to live a long life. Decades ago, the United Kingdom recognized that children are not just little adults, and there was a need for this type of dedicated family care. The first children's hospice home in the world, Helen House, opened in 1982 in Oxford, England. This is not a place for dying, it is for living, even though those lives may be short. The goal is to connect with a family the moment they discover their child has a life-limiting condition and they are on this path. To hold their hand through the entire journey by providing much needed respite, short overnight breaks to catch up on sleep and recharge, palliative care, and when needed, end-of-life hospice services. Anything that is being done to care for a child at home can be done here. Trachs, breathing machines, adaptive toilets, medicine routines each day, caring for the child to give parents a chance to sleep. I want to reinforce that last bullet. There are no charges for any of these services to the families. These homes rely on community fundraising, around $3 million a year, every year. As of today, there is not a consistently defined Medicaid or insurance reimbursement model available to support these services. So let's address one of the elephants in the room, what to call these homes. Outside the US, globally, these are described as children's hospice homes. They are embraced and understood, but as Americans, we are still wrestling with uncomfortable language. I get it. Hospice feels associated with death and end of life, and parents and caregivers want hopes and cures. There is greater understanding of palliative care, but the concept is still foreign to most people in the general public. What we know is that when we provide the services at the bottom of this slide to the people represented at the top, they are so thankful. Whatever we call it, it works. For the moment, an informal collection of US communities is pursuing this vision has been building, and we've called ourselves the like houses. So for the rest of the webinar today, that's the umbrella term I'll use to refer to us, like houses. As I mentioned earlier, the world's first is Helen House in Oxford, England, almost 40 years ago. Today, in a country roughly a fifth the size of the United States, there are 54 children's hospices. The United States has only 3. The first 2, George Mark Children's House in California, and the one my wife and I co-founded, Ryan House in Arizona, began over a decade ago. The third, Crescent Cove, opened in Minnesota in 2018. Let's go inside these homes and understand what they do and how they work. Here's Ryan House. When I give tours, people are very complimentary of the beautiful building. It started with a very generous land donation and then was built from the ground up in the style of the British Helen House model. Comfortable and casual spaces that include rooms that families just don't have at home. A sensory room, music room, hydrotherapy pool, and a fully accessible playground. When parents, caregivers, and siblings join the child, they relax in one of the 3 family suites. Please visit each organization's website to see their beautiful tour videos and gorgeous photos of their respective homes and spaces. You'll see why these are real destinations and places of excitement for the kids to want to visit. But the building is only part of the story. It's the world-class team that delivers the full palliative care support that creates the confidence for parents to entrust their child for us for a short stay. It's the people that make this a home. All right, so this is my most eyesore page, so I apologize for this, but I want to be sure to explain how the model works and the services a like house has in general. Okay, so we start with a child with complex medical conditions. This is not disease specific. The common denominator is that the child is not expected to live into adulthood or have a long life. Realistically, that can be very difficult to predict, but it is a guide that the healthcare professionals and teams align around when determining qualification for services. Our goal is to connect with the family the moment they know they're on this journey. Often this is at the moment of diagnosis, but I would even suggest that it may be sooner at a moment of concern. Sometimes it takes a while to confirm a diagnosis, and sometimes that never gets defined. Once they're in the family, a like house provides short-term respite breaks and palliative care services along the journey. The child can stay at the house for a couple of days, always includes an overnight, up to typically 7 days, and then have up to 28 days a year. Now, it's a guide, not a steadfast rule. At Ryan House, for instance, the first time a child stays, the parent or primary caregiver must also stay the night in one of our 3 family suites. The reason for this is that everyone needs to get comfortable. Both the child, parents, and even siblings are welcome as well. After that, if desired, the child can stay at the home without the parents. In fact, most stays are like that. Parents are excited to go back home to sleep soundly, or maybe take a short trip or spend time with their other children. The children that stay love it. And there is a kind of Vegas rule in place. What happens at the house stays at the house. Enough said. While every child is unique, you do find that there are many common elements to care that our teams become highly skilled at. We know how to administer medicines, manage trachs, use adaptive toilets, charge wheelchairs, use slings to get kids in and out of beds, showers, and even the hydrotherapy pool.
Within a meeting.
There is usually a dull murmur of suction equipment, cough machines, and the like occurring throughout the house. I'll say again, anything that is being done to care for a child at home can be done here. Caring for the child to give parents a chance to sleep. The culture is home. Sometimes that is calm and relaxing, and sometimes it's a bit crazy and chaotic when the local sports team comes for tea parties and fun. Whatever, it's a home. And when a child's journey reaches the end of life, we are the natural children's hospice home. There is no time limit for that. Sometimes it may be days or weeks or even sometimes months. Each home typically has a room or more focused for this care and a family suites to support the family closeness. The ideal is that the family has utilized the house for respite and palliative care along the way, and we are naturally transitioning support to more hospice levels as needed. When a child dies, that impacts a family forever. Each home has beautiful memorial recognition and respects the connection forever. Once they become part of the family, they're always part of the family. There's no 6 months within end of life, nor 1 to 2 years of bereavement. We support the family, full stop. The #1 priority is end of life support. Our teams are ready because that call or knock at the door may happen whenever. Next priority is emergency respite. If you need us, we want to be there to help. If that means we need to bump a family planning to come, we'll do that, and know that we would do the same for them. And then finally, planned respite stays. Overall, about 80% of the house usage is for planned respite stays. This is the main thing that we provide. About 20% of the services are end of life or hospice. So while these homes are globally described as children's hospice homes, you can see that they are that and much more. And everything at no charge to the family. We don't charge families anything for anything. Now, if there's insurance or Medicaid reimbursement available, the homes will pursue those and have had some spotty successes with that. I just wanted to reinforce the breadth of support we provide. It does not matter what the diagnosis of the child is. Once they're qualified for services and in the family, it really is more about resource allocation. How do we meet the child and family needs? And this may change from state to state depending on the journey. For example, my son Ryan may require low levels of support while staying at the house. He may have played with other children, volunteers may help him eat or do crafts, but may need support for daily living needs like toileting or bathing and medicines. Other children may need closer one-on-one care to monitor breathing, trachs, suctioning, or very complicated care needs. If the child is cared for at home, we can care for that child at a like house. And again, there are no charges for the services to the families. Okay, in the US, it is the two primary ends of the spectrum where the focus of care conversations typically reside: hospital or home health. For the child and family, all of this care remains under the oversight of a primary care physician and specialist. As I'll explain, the like houses are really extensions of home. They fulfill part of the care continuum they fulfill a missing part of the care continuum in most communities. To ground our discussion, this is what the like houses represent. They are not a replacement for the hospital, nor a medical facility. They are not a babysitting service, nor a daycare for a few hours at a time, nor are they a long-term facility for care. Sometimes in Phoenix, we'd have people ask if Ryan actually lived at Ryan House. No, he lived at home with us. A like house is there to support the most fragile families along the most difficult journeys imaginable. When Helen's mom, or mum since they were in England, recounts the story of how Helen House formed, she described it as a simple concept: friends and family helping friends and family. I like to talk about it as a caregiving model, not a medical model. These are the core team member roles involved in delivering the phenomenal services at a like house. Do you see any roles here that you're not familiar with? All of these roles exist in either hospitals or in home health. Departments of health in every state understand that people with these skills, departments of health in every state understand what people with these skills do day to day. There are licensing structures and Medicaid reimbursement rates for each of these roles already, but either non-existent or not consistently for a like house. Why? When my son was at a hospital, Medicaid covered those expenses. We had 5 nights of nighttime nursing coverage during the last couple years of his life and attendant care support in our home for after school through the evening. But when Ryan stayed at Ryan House for a few days, all that funding stream stopped. What is missing is the connection to a like house environment, creating a licensing structure that honors what these homes provide along the care continuum and appropriate reimbursement for the required team staffing to deliver the care. Until recently in the US, these homes had not existed, and today there are only a few of them. Attention needs to be raised as to their value and the important contribution they make as a much needed part of the care continuum. All right, so any webinar presented during the pandemic needs to recognize the devastating impact that COVID is having. Here's a recent post by the Kaiser Family Foundation that speaks to the nursing shortage that was challenging even before COVID, but has been amplified now during the crisis. The nursing and attendant shortage is having a significant impact on the direct care workforce. Hospitals are highly stressful environments, they now contribute to having to pay significant increased wages to recruit and retain quality nursing care. Home health agencies are struggling to hire, even though the demand is there. It's the families that need it, but no providers can staff it. So the families suffer with this unmet need. Like houses are not immune to this, but are in the middle of this competition pull. One advantage that like houses have in recruiting and retaining nurses and other team members is that this type of work done inside a like house is often a calling for those that choose to work there. Yes, wages are important, but this is more than that. Children's hospitals are where the medical expertise is. That's the place, and those are the discussions about hoping for a cure, determining the best treatment plans, and managing crisis. Our local hospital, Phoenix Children's Hospital, was almost a second home during Ryan's lifetime. When you need it, you need it. It, of course, varies, but I'd say that maybe 10 to 15% of life is spent in the hospital. Most of living is outside, hopefully. Therefore, I think everyone can agree that a hospital is not the ideal environment for a respite solution. Then respite should all happen at home, right? Well, some of the realities of home health are daunting. Let's assume your child has the authorized hours and agreement from Medicaid to fund those services. A big if. Mostly because the system does not do an adequate job of helping the family navigate and understand what resources could be available. I'm thankful that Arizona has a strong Medicaid system, and my wife and I were effective champions of Ryan's needs. I know families in our own same city whose child had similar needs as Ryan, but whose own child suffered from a lack of knowing how to advocate effectively. That's a story for another webinar, but it also speaks to why a like house can benefit your community. Again, assuming authorization is not an issue, just providing overnight respite in a home environment would require at least 2 to 3 staff members to cover the 24-hour period. Every family has horror stories of how often home health staff change. And all know that when a good one comes along, your fingers are crossed that they stay a while. If they do, they naturally become extensions of your family. Unplanned attendant and nurse emergencies happen all the time. Alarm didn't go off, flat tire, personal sickness, those create immediate gaps in care for the child. Daytime cover is one thing, but trying to secure support for a nighttime nurse is at a whole nother level of stress completely. The trust factor has to be raised exponentially because you're sleeping in the other room. The child and families need it, but few actually get those services sufficiently to meet their needs. So it's pretty easy to follow the logic flow at this point as to why like houses offer some significant advantages for your community. Like houses are a shared services model. Generally, 1 or 2 nurses are in the house at all times, overseeing up to 8 children with the support of attendants and aides and volunteers. Therefore, overall costs are reduced compared to trying to sustain this as in a home for one-on-one care. As explained earlier, care is overseen by a medical director. In Ryan's case, it's a part-time role, and the child's own primary care doctor retains responsibility supported by the house care team. Because working in a home like this is often a calling, that helps to slow down or minimize staff turnover, so there is strong continuity of the team. While every child is unique, each like house serves a breadth of children and families that the like house care team is already familiar with. So the like house team is already familiar with all the equipment and care regimen procedures, and they can quickly adapt for a new child and family. And perhaps most importantly, the like house is always open all year long, dependable, safe, and trustworthy. By now you're getting it. You understand the model and are wanting one or more in your community. Here's the opportunity. The US has only 3 today, and other parts of the world are clearly leading for this innovative care model. If we had the same penetration as the United Kingdom, the US would have 266 of these homes across the country already. Even Australia's penetration would equal at least 39 houses in the US. Well, the good news and the challenge is that there are 3 already operational, and there are at least 15 other communities in various stages of 501c3 that are reaching out to connect with a shared desire as they pursue this common vision. So here's where the US is today. The 3 houses I've mentioned, and I've added a 4th to the list. A Rosie Place in South Bend, Indiana has been open since 2010, providing respite only, no end of life or hospice services to families in their state. Since one of the biggest challenges we are solving is respite reimbursement, a Rosie Place is right in there with the other 3 operational homes and has a lot of passion, experience, and expertise to add to these strategies. George Mark Children's House is in a suburb of Oakland, California. Its founder, Dr. Kathy Hull, became aware of the UK Children's Hospice Home model and felt that that would be a perfect way to honor her brothers, Mark and George, who died young at 16 and 30 respectively. I fondly speak of George Mark as the first home in the US. They broke through and proved that this is a much needed care model for the United States. Their passionate team has been the glue that has connected the like houses throughout these early development years by hosting bi-monthly calls where all the programs connect to share best practices, ask questions, and overall inspire each other. The second home in the US is Ryan House in Phoenix, Arizona. My wife and I are an Arizona family, but had the opportunity to live and work in London, England for 3 years. This is when our second son, Ryan, was born and diagnosed with SMA. 11 hours on a plane to the closest family, the health professionals in London recommended we visit Helen House. That was 45 minutes up the road in Oxford, England. We were reluctant to go since it was described as a hospice house, but eventually we agreed. We loved it immediately. We returned to Arizona and were able to celebrate Ryan's second birthday, and then another until 17. A year after our return, my wife started talking passionately about our Helen House experience. A community, including myself, rallied around her, and the stars aligned for Ryan House. Our team is successful through innovative community partnerships with Hospice of the Valley and others, and an incredible effort by our board, admin team, and generous community that raises $3 million each year to sustain the program. Crescent Cove's founder, Katie Lindenfelser, is a trained music therapist from Minnesota. She had spent years in Australia where she was exposed to this model of care. Returning to the Twin Cities, she set out to learn more and began the effort to pursue a home. She and her amazing team were able to open Crescent Cove 3 years ago and are working tirelessly on state-level licensure and Medicaid reimbursement advocacy. They have successfully received over $900,000 of respite reimbursement during the most recent fiscal year. So not long ago, the US had 0 homes. Today, these 3 and 4th homes have years of collective knowledge on how to operate the costs, barriers, and challenges, and family experiences. So how do we get respite reimbursement? If we put hospital, home health, and the like houses side by side, we can see the key parts in alignment. The children are all the same. The people and the team roles are well understood. Nothing new here. Even palliative care trends in hospitals are becoming more known and reimbursed, and therefore should be a familiar discussion as we extend those as part of our care at a like house. The issue is that these like houses are just appearing on the radar screen. There has not been a voice at the table. Few have heard of them, less than a handful of communities have them, so the initial swell has been hard to create, but momentum is building. All the pieces exist. It's about creating a licensure map for this model and connecting the dots. It's pretty easy, right? All right, so the formula for scalability of like houses really boils down to a few key components. We need to ultimately get these like houses recognized with their own licensure category to stop the short-term fixes of using duct tape and band-aids to fracture current licensure options in an effort to get open. We need adequate reimbursement for the services that are provided, which respect the benefits of a shared services model and that can see past the silos of existing hospital, home health, and even hospice, realizing that elements of all of those coexist within a like house environment. And with that, we need the providers in each community to go for it, to want and push for their development. We all know that the current model of relying on philanthropy is not a scalable approach. With appropriate reimbursement, especially the respite component, a community can provide the philanthropic support to build the building, and then know that operationally there's a sustainable reimbursement stream to keep it going. That's how we address the unmet needs for our families we serve. The goal is to get the next house over the finish line, and then to 10, 20, 40, and more, and all the while strengthening the continuity of the existing homes. It's an exciting time. We had a recent Zoom meeting where all the founders and leaders of the operational homes were together. We know each other, but had never all been at the same place at the same time. It's a milestone and another stars aligned moment. We are evolving from an informal coalition to a formal leadership team for national scalability. A first step is to address that elephant and finally agree on what we want to call this care model in the US. And we'll have that resolved soon. Another key effort to address, which was emphasized to me during my Johns Hopkins program, is the importance of having evidence-based research published in peer-reviewed journals to support our advocacy and policy efforts. There is very little or actually nothing written about what we just discussed in the US. That's about to change. I'm presenting this webinar today at the request of Dr. Kim Whitmore, a researcher out of Marquette, whom we're excited to work with and have already sketched out a research plan and preliminary scope that we are presenting to a foundation for funding. Stay tuned, you'll be reading more about these efforts in the coming year. And finally, we want to elevate the best practices and learnings on this model from the operational homes in the US and other global experiences to document the conceptual framework or the business plan for dissemination and to ease implementation for emerging communities. Together, we'll be developing a strategic plan for advocacy and change at the state and federal level. We'll be providing a collective voice at the table to represent this model as part of the care continuum in the Medicaid, state waiver, and overall pediatric palliative care, respite, and hospice decision-making conversations. I look forward to working directly with many of you joined on the webinar today as we strive to achieve those efforts. So here's Ryan enjoying one of the many stays at Helen House. Our wish in starting Ryan House was to bring Helen House to Arizona. Nothing more, but nothing less. This to me, like most of you, is a passionate pursuit. I am guided by my North Star. The number one thing families want more than anything is a cure for their child. Next is to catch up on sleep. With that, they can handle the next challenge and the one after that. The US needs hundreds of children's hospice homes. Today it has 3. Let's get to work. So once again, I'd like to thank Dr. Whitmore and Break Exchange for creating the opportunity to present this webinar today, and to Jill Kagan with our National Respite Network and Resource Center for getting the word out and promoting it. I wish we had more time to go further into the details and backgrounds, and I hope the overview has been helpful for your thinking, and I thank you for listening. I'd now look forward to opening the discussion. Please feel free to unmute yourself or put your question in the comment in the chat room.
Thank you so much for that great presentation, Jonathan. What an incredible, model you guys have here, and it's just so great to see how you've placed this in perspective in the US and also globally. So as Jonathan mentioned, we welcome questions, and I can help moderate that chat. Jonathan, if you want to stop sharing your screen, then we can see everybody a little bit better. That usually promotes discussion a little bit better too.
Great.
Perfect. Great. So I'm just going to pull up this chat. You got lots of thank you, Jonathans, in the chat. Any questions that anybody has for Jonathan, or comments that you want to share? Again, you can post them in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand and we'll let you unmute and talk live.
Jonathan, can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Great job.
Hey, Bob.
The Lighthouse Group, really, we've got to be so thankful that you guys continue this effort. It's so incredibly important. It saddens me to think how usually people are so open for children's services, but when it comes to our kids, they just seem to not want to even look at it. And in my state, New York, they want to look at it more as an additional cost, and they don't understand the concept of how important respite is, as you elegantly were saying, the relief for parents. So yeah. Thank you so much for doing this. The more that we keep the Lighthouse going and the advocacy, I think it'll only be better for all of us, to try to get the word out. I was able to get the long-term care, and we offer palliative when our kids that are in the long-term care.
Yeah.
The respite and palliative continues to be a struggle outside of an institutional model, which we all know is not the ideal situation. Right. So thanks again, and Kim, I'm excited about I really hope we get the funding for the research, because.
Oh yeah, we will.
Yeah,
I have no doubt, because we certainly are going to a premier foundation right now that I'm feeling confident will want to get involved, and if not, there's a line. So
great.
Again,
we're gonna get this going.
There's a question in the chat from Suzanne. Suzanne, if you want to unmute and ask that live, you can. Otherwise, I can read it. I think she's staying muted, so I'll read it. Do you also have behaviorally challenged kiddos in this house model? A parent of a child with PDD, NOS, bipolar, NOS, ODD, IED.
Yeah, most kids with complex medical conditions are a multitude of. It's like, what's the primary diagnosis, and then what's the list of other things that are kind of occurring and happening with the child. And so in that sense, there would be combinations of those within the children that we serve. The primary connection, though, is life-limiting condition. It's really, that's the real driver, because this model is really about connecting with the families on a short journey through respite and palliative care services through to end of life and hospice. And then we become that natural hospice and bereavement support and family support there. So that's really the main driver for this model of care. So a child only with a mental behavioral diagnosis likely would not qualify to stay at Ryan House or a like house.
Great, thanks for that. I don't see any other questions while we're waiting for other people to post questions. I just want to point out in the chat, there's a couple links that Tyler posted about the break exchange and our upcoming networking hours. So call those to your attention. And Kagan from Arch also posted some more information and a link about the Arch Innovative and Exemplary Respite Practices, and encourage you to learn more and read more about the Ryan House in that link that she shared as well. It looks like a question just came in. Oh, a comment looks like same here. George Mark, life-limiting illness is the main qualifier for our services. Thank you for adding that. Anyone else have a question for Jonathan or a comment that they want to share with the group? So Jonathan, I'll keep watching, but while we're waiting for others, I'm wondering if maybe you want to just describe a little bit more about the research opportunities that we're pursuing, because I think this is the beauty of the break exchange, is really trying to connect researchers like me with passionate program people who have model practices so that we can actually move some of this evidence base forward.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I think well, as I mentioned, there just is not a lot written about these. And the goal is to get these on the radar screen for decision makers and thought leaders across the country to just participate. There's a lot. I mean, as I talk to a lot of people, as we all do across the country, I believe there's lots of passionate people around this idea of pediatric palliative care, around respite, around end of life and hospice. But there's very few organizations really kind of doing it well in a cohesive way. And so but one of the key things is to get it published and get people talking about this more. And so what we were on is a quest to find a researcher that really understood and was passionate about this model. So in our journey to find a researcher initially, we've talked to a few researchers back at Pennsylvania at CHOP that were in a fellowship and kind of tied up. That kind of brought us to Lisa Lindley over at the University of Tennessee, and who spends a lot of her focus in end of life and hospice, but which is great. And we're still looking and talking to them about how do we talk about that part of the model. But 80% of our services are respite for these like houses. And so and that's really the part that has no consistent reimbursement model. So we're really seeking a respite researcher to write about this. And it was really then the conversations that Jill and I had who led us to Kim. And so when we met Kim, it was like, eureka, this is perfect. What an awesome person with a real passion for respite and a connection for our families, our population that we all serve. And so just, again, stars align kind of moment. So Jill and I, we scoped out a research plan roughly to present to a foundation in kind of 3 stages. The first stage is really to get some quick family experiences documented. So the beauty of having 3 and now 4 with a Rosie Place, because they're 100% respite, and so they also serve families in a very similar way. So across those 4 houses, we can tap into those families, do some qualitative research, bring that together in terms of a family experience type of study, and get some things published, more quickly than a full-blown quantitative kind of study and et cetera. So that's our first goal first, is to tap into those families, get those family experiences documented, share those experiences in a cohesive way and get that published. At the same time, we're thinking about the next stage and the next stage. And we want to then go back to the operational leaders of these existing homes and really document and understand the model as it works in the US. As I shared in Phoenix, we really had a vision of bringing Helen House to Phoenix, but it's not a hard and fast, you must do a Helen House model. It really is a guide. Because if you go back to that chart that I had, or if I went back to that chart that I had with all the services, I put in the lower right-hand corner, some of you may have noticed, step down and transitional services. Those are very much needed by a lot of our families. We don't happen to do that in Phoenix at Ryan House, But I know George Mark does a little bit of that. And there are other programs across the country that do step down and transitional services, even to a greater extent. And so each community needs to decide what type of services they want to do. But at the core, I think respite is really going to be the main effort. So we want to document that into the business and include that in the research plan. And then ultimately the goal is to connect with a health economist so that we can really get, our sleeves rolled up and talk about funding streams and really what needs to happen in terms of the proper respite reimbursement rate, so we can build an advocacy strategy for that federally and at the state level.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Jonathan. And I think, he mentioned the stars aligning, and we're hoping that the Break Exchange helps those stars align for people much easier. The idea of the Break Exchange is to connect, programs and people passionate about respite care like Jonathan with researchers and evaluators so that we can have more of these projects around the globe and build that evidence base towards it. And I want to just point out in the chat that Jill Kagan from ARC also posted some great information about the wonderful work that they do in promoting respite research, and there is a new ARCH committee for the advancement of respite research, and you can learn more about that and check out the research agenda that was developed through that effort as well on the ARCH website. So please call your attention to that. Any other questions from anyone or comments? Curious, this is a place for connecting. So even if you just want to say hi and say why you're here and where you're from and what you got out of this presentation, we would love to hear from you. It's so great to see so many people on this webinar. Maybe some of our colleagues from some of the other houses that I see are here might want to just say hi.
Hi, I'm Kyle at George Mark Children's House. I'm the child life specialist here, and I'm so excited to hear about the research. And I know a lot of our families would love to be involved, like our parent resource group. So thank you so much, Jonathan, for this and for pursuing research. I think it's so important.
I just to comment on child life, because I love child life. And certainly as we were building the team in Arizona, we really put child life in a very important leadership role for us, because something we didn't get into during the actual presentation is the depth of conversations and the kind of things that happen. I mentioned the building, and everybody at first when they come to her at George Mark or Ryan House or Crescent Cove, their first reaction is, oh, this is a beautiful building. And they are. They're home-like settings, and that for sure, we're very proud of all of that, and it's been a lot of hard work to get us there, but it's way more than that. It's the team that makes it a home. That's how parents entrust us to the care of their children. And the kind of conversations that happen in a home like this are really, they just don't happen outside of a home like this. It's really just such a safe, trusting environment. Not to go off on a rabbit hole here, but it was really at Helen House that I learned about death, and that I really got comfortable with becoming a parent of a child, because my biggest fear was being alone with my son. Even though I was already a parent of a toddler, my biggest fear was to give, if my wife was going to go out and get a break to go to dinner, I was panicked to be alone with my son at home in case he died. And it was really trying to understand those feelings and understand his care that happened in a place, for me, it was Helen House, that I really got comfortable with. Everybody's born, everybody lives, and everybody dies, and it's okay. And let's just, help this family and child go through that journey. And that's when I became a dad to Ryan, I really can say. So, and it's child life. I mean, it's the culture, that's the conversations, that's the meat of the house.
Totally agree. Thank you for sharing. And also, having worked in the hospital environment and then at George Mark, the sibling support aspect, the conversations with siblings, I just feel like are so much more deep in this setting.
I mean, my family, early in the days, we had a chance as a family to come up and stay at George Mark. And for us, that was a wonderful, long, extended weekend where we really experienced our first child death. Up until then, we had grandparents that had died, but we'd never been around a family or a child who had died. And it was during the weekend at George Mark where there was a young baby who really was not expected to live very long, who died. And then there was also a young teenage woman who my older son and my son Ryan played with throughout the weekend and really enjoyed. And then by the end of the weekend, we had gone into San Francisco to be a tourist for the day and came back. And by the time we got back, she had died. And we're like, what? We just played with her this morning. How is that possible? And so it just was healthy for my kids and me and my wife to just really be around that experience and to just be with the family and just understand it and love it. And yeah, these houses are beyond amazing.
Yeah, clearly some just incredible work that's done, family centered and so important. This is hard work, and you can hear the passion in Jonathan's voice. This is really personal work, and I think that we all leave this presentation just with a new appreciation for how important places like Ryan House are for these families, and especially that respite care in these homes. I think is what we want to also focus on, is that these parents need to feel okay with taking those breaks and having that time away so that they can come back with that energy to not be scared to care for their children as well. So I think that it's just so great. We appreciate you so much, Jonathan, for sharing all of this and your passion, and so excited to continue to work with you. We have just a couple minutes, so I'll leave it open in case there's anyone else that has other comments or want to share anything. If there's anyone else on the line that wants to unmute, there's a lot of thank yous in the chat, Jonathan. I'm not sure if you're seeing those.
Yep, I see those.
Lots of people excited for this work.
I think the biggest challenge, I think, for us is just to do things like this, just to get talked about and just start to get people to understand that this model exists here in the US. There was, I remember 15, 20 years ago, and George Mark even goes back farther than that, that everybody thought kids want to die at the hospital or they want to die at home. Those are the only two choices in the world. And they didn't, and respite, has always been important, but nobody's figured out how to really do respite well. In fact, today, as I loop through the country and talk a lot about, to the thought leaders and decision makers in the country, the number one issue that most people have is, how do we do respite? And everybody wants home health. That's great. I am a huge proponent of home health. I'm thankful that we had a very good Medicaid system here in Arizona, and my wife and I were able to advocate for our son. So we were able to get nighttime nursing at home. We were able to get attendant care at home. But my son lived for 17 years. I can't tell you how many, revolving door and changes that we had in our home health situation, or how many months that we had, or how many times a person or a nurse would come and just like, oh, you just reek of smoke. Mm. My wife would immediately say, nope, you're not even coming in the house. Sorry, you're not coming in. And then great, now we're 2 months away from finding the next one. Mm. And so it's like, yes, we want home health to be successful. And yes, that is the place to really do it. But in the meantime, each community needs something like what we're talking about, one of these like houses, because we fill in that gap. We're always open, we're there. Plus we do a lot more, but we're always there for those families to get a break. If I can just get some sleep, we can get over and handle the next stress.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, I think we'll definitely keep the meeting open for those that want to stick around and chat some more, but we'll officially thank you and close out our webinar today. We hope that you all sign up for the Break Exchange so that you can stay connected with our monthly e-newsletter so you're made aware of future webinars. This presentation is being recorded and will be posted on our website, and we will send out a link to all those who are part of our newsletter. We'll post it on social media as well. So if you have people in your networks that you think should hear this and watch this presentation, we encourage you to share that. Again, I want to thank Jill Kagan from Arch for helping to co-host and promote this webinar within the Arch National Respite Network group. And thank you so much, Jonathan, for taking the time and sharing your incredible passion and knowledge with all of us today. Ryan would be very proud of his dad.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Take care.